So
including this slideshow.
yeah, and we'll have the slides up there too. Thank you, Rick. Absolutely. We'll put the slides up there as well. So thank you for joining us today. It's my pleasure to introduce you to Cindy Hunter. Cindy is a member of the Woodstock Club. She was very involved in helping past District Governor Tim Carter with his district conference. She was a co-chair there. She did a great job along with Carter Knapp with that. And she is professionally, she is the Director of Human Resources at Westminster Canterbury of Shenandoah Valley. She is also a certified trainer, and I've experienced Cindy many years ago in training with my company. She did a great job doing a lot of training with us there. And so just delighted she's going to be here to share with us some best practices on leading volunteers, particularly leading volunteers. So without further ado, Cindy, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thanks, Kathy. And for everybody who doesn't know Kathy, she's, as I said a minute ago, she's the wizard behind the curtain. She's the one that makes everything happen. So I'm really excited to be here with you today. I will tell you, sitting in front of a computer in a room by myself is not how I like to train. I want to be in the same room with you where I can see the whites of your eyes. So it's a little weird to be just kind of sitting here talking to myself, but we'll make the best of it. So I was asked to talk about leading, and specifically about leading volunteers. And so let's talk a little bit about where we're going. You know, a good trainer tells you where you're going. They take you on the journey, and then they remind you of where you've been. So this is where we're starting. We're going to talk first about how do you lead. You know, many of you may be managers and leaders in your organizations. And I don't know about you, but leading volunteers is a totally different experience. So we'll talk first about how you lead. The next thing we'll do then is to talk about recruiting volunteers. And that's certainly a big topic right now. Many of our clubs have suffered over the last year, and some of our clubs were maybe experiencing some decline even before COVID. So we'll talk a little bit about that. I taught a class this week here for mid-level managers here, and we talked about getting the right people on the bus. And so I think the same applies to our club. So we'll talk about that. The next thing we'll talk a little bit about is, after you've gotten those volunteers recruited, how do you mentor them? You know, what can you do to make sure that they, you know, stay on the journey with you? And we'll wrap up just with a discussion about communication. So let me just say, first of all, I'm pretty technologically challenged, and Kathy, for 10 minutes before you all joined the call, tried to talk me through how to get the chat window up, and I can't get it up. So I was hoping we could have a conversation. And with the number of people we have on the call, I would be perfectly comfortable with you unmuting yourself if you want to talk to me, because I want you to talk back. So I want you to think about leaders, you know, specifically that super leader. Think about, and for me, there is a face that pops into my head. When I think about the best leader I've ever had, there she is. I don't even have to close my eyes. I see her. So if you can either post in chat or unmute yourself and talk to me, tell me and the rest of the group, what are some characteristics that made this leader so extraordinary?
Don't be shy, people.
Dynamic.
They were dynamic. So they were excited. They motivated you to want to follow where they were going. Okay.
That's right.
Else?
In the chat, Cindy, we've got empathetic.
Empathetic.
Lead by example.
Lead by example. We're going to talk about that.
A good listener.
Good listener. We're going to talk about that too.
Committed.
Committed. Anybody else?
I'll add mine. Caring.
Caring. Okay.
Oh, here's
I'm sorry.
Positive.
Positive. Some of mine are fair. You know, I deserve to be held accountable. And if I do something wrong, I need to be called on that. Good sense of humor. Uh, I don't know about you, but I spend most weeks, I spend more time with my coworkers than I do my family. And you know, we work really hard, but it's nice to kind of let loose every now and then, just have some fun.
We
So
got a couple
now,
more, Cindy, in the chat. Personable,
personable,
knew their people,
knew their people,
and passionate.
passionate. Oh, passionate is such a big one. You know, how would you feel if I was your leader and every morning I said, okay, team, today I think maybe we'll do, you know, you'd be asleep and you'd be updating your resume. So I want to flip the table a little bit and tell me about your worst leader. And for some of you, this may be an even more vivid picture than the first one. What made them a bad leader?
Questionable ethics,
Oh, questionable ethics.
a bully,
A bully.
narcissistic,
Narcissistic. Wait, you mean it's not all about me? But
mine was it was his way or no way.
absolutely.
Had no respect for the employees.
Yeah. Mine was
Self-centered,
what?
self-centered.
Self-centered. Mine was a screamer.
A what?
A screamer.
Oh.
Okay, so you've got two probably pretty vivid faces in your mind right now. You know, I've been blessed with a couple of really great managers in my career. One of them was my first manager out of college, when I didn't even know enough to know what I didn't know. And it was someone who treated me fairly, who treated me respectfully. I would have followed them anywhere. And so I spent the first couple of years of my professional, his name was Jim. I spent the first couple of years of my professional career muttering under my breath, if I'm ever a manager, I'm going to be just like Jim. Jim was followed by my so far to date worst manager, the screamer. Her name was Mary. And so I spent the next couple of years of my professional career muttering under my breath, if I'm ever a manager, I'm going to be nothing like her. So good or bad, both of those experiences shaped me. So think about these managers, think about these characteristics. And then I want you to think about your volunteers. And if I had, instead of you all as managers and leaders in your clubs, if I had your volunteers here instead of you, and I asked them the same question, would your face pop into their head? And if it did, for which example? So just some food for thought there. You know, this is good. I can't see you, so you know, I can't see how you're reacting to that, but you know, hopefully you're thinking about those characteristics that we talked about as that positive leader, and you know that that's how you lead too. So let's answer that question. How do you lead? I've got a couple of pictures here of, you know, great leaders as far as I'm concerned. Good leaders are truth tellers. They're feedback providers in a way that's honest, fair, respectful. Those are some of the words we've already used. They're respectful of differences. They value diversity. Good managers also tend to be really good listeners. And to be a good listener, you also have to be a good question asker. Because the only way you get the information you need is to ask the right question. Good leaders dig. They create an environment that people love, and they work hard to dig beneath the surface to find out what it is people are looking for, or maybe what's not meeting their expectation. They think outside of the box, and they work hard to create an environment that is inclusive. Doesn't that sound a lot like Rotary? So here are some thoughts to ponder. Don't be a committee of one. Just because you are a leader or a manager or a club president, you are not the keeper of all good ideas. And remember that there is positional power that goes with that title of club president or vice president or a committee chair. And you need to be very, very careful to allow your team to share their ideas. If you are in a leadership role, you can say, so team, what do you think? How do you think we should do this? And as soon as you say the words, here's what I think, you have just effectively cut off any ideas you are going to get from your team. Some of you may be familiar with the Myers-Briggs type indicator, the MBTI. I'm a certified Myers-Briggs instructor. I teach Myers-Briggs workshops all the time. And the allowing people to speak, if you happen to be an extrovert, I happen to be an extrovert. I know how hard this is. It's really hard to not answer your own question if somebody doesn't jump in there quickly. But you know what? If I have introverts on my team, or maybe people that aren't quite as comfortable, it may take them a little think time before they're willing to jump in. And if, as an extrovert, I say, so team, what do you think? Let me tell you what I think. We're done. You are going to offer me no feedback. So hang on. I forgot to mute my phone. There you go. I'm still sitting at my desk. Sorry. So just know that sometimes unintentionally we may shut ideas off from other people. We're not always the expert. Another thing that as a leader we need to do is plan for the unexpected. Kathy mentioned that she and I and Rick and Leslie and a couple of other folks on the call are on the district training team. And I will tell you, whether it is a live conference for 400 people or a conference call for 20 people, there is always a plan A, B, and C. So that's what the people we lead expect from us. Some other thoughts about leaders. Our jobs as leaders is to remove obstacles that get in the way of people's success, of employee success, of volunteer success, of moving the organization toward the goals and strategies that it's set out for. Successful leaders understand that, think of great sports coaches. They're not out there on the field running the plays. They are providing knowledge, skills, training, and then they are paving the way for the success of their team. They are leading, they're advising, but then they get out of the way and they let their players play. So you're a coach. Think of how you can prepare your players for their roles. What do they need to prepare them for success? What are some of the challenges that they're going to run into, or maybe you've run into yourself? And then how do you go about providing the tools they need, the training, the skills? We're going to talk about mentors in a little while. And mentors are a great way to get that knowledge passed on in our clubs and in our teams. Everybody wants a meaningful opportunity. Nobody I know says, you know what, I think I'm going to join that club so I can do nothing. Said no one ever. So think about the roles that you are recruiting volunteers for. Our clubs are generationally diverse. And so, what a 60-year-old may want from a club may be very different from what a 20-year-old wants. And so it's important to, I also teach a class on understanding generational differences. So, it's really important to understand what people are looking for. Are they a joiner? Do they join everything that comes their way? Or are they very selective because they believe in the mission of the organization? How many of you or how many people are Rotarians because you asked them to help with trash pickup, or you invited them to Pints for Polio, or you included them back in the days when we had galas. So you hooked them, or you got them involved. That's probably not the nicest word. You got them involved because of something that interested them. You keep them involved by finding out what makes them passionate. Sometimes we need to change what we do and how we do it. If someone had said to you, Kathy mentioned the district conference. Yes, I was one of the co-chairs of the district conference that everyone's going to remember as the one that, for the most part, wasn't. Those of us at the homestead still had a great time, but we weren't doing what we thought we were going to do. And so, that was March the 13th of 2021, Friday the 13th of 2020, I'm sorry. Think about the second bullet point. How have we changed everything we do? Would you have believed a year ago, a little over a year ago, that someone would have said, forget everything you know, how can we start from scratch? And isn't that what we've done? So it is being nimble and flexible, and allowing for those other ideas. Remember me saying, as soon as you say, this is what I think, you're not going to get those new ideas. Do your volunteers know how important they are to your organization? I come from a business background, so you'll see that a lot of my slides, I probably took the word employee out and put the word volunteer in. But in a lot of cases, it's the same thing. When you look at these 4 questions at the bottom of the screen, it doesn't matter whether it is one of my employees that are paid to do a job or someone that's on my committee, because I want them to know how important everything they do is. I want to know. A lot of us work with people that, are pretty humble. And they're not going to be the ones raising their hand going, excuse me, did you know I'm a technical genius? But if I ask the question, Rick Furr, what talents do you have that we aren't using? He happens to be a technical genius. But if I don't ask that question, I may never know that. To ask them the question, what do you find challenging? What do you find rewarding? I should probably add to this, what makes you just bang your head on the table? Because that's important too. And for sometimes in Rotary and in life, you volunteer for something and it becomes a lifetime appointment. Even for somebody who's been in a role for a really long time, it's a good question to ask. How would you like to see your role change? Would you like to do something different? So let's talk more about this environment that successful leaders create. Doesn't it feel good to be in an environment where we know that our ideas and opinions are wanted, they're being asked for, information is exchanged? Kathy mentioned her worst boss was, my way or the highway. How many times do you have to be pushed down before you stop offering ideas, stop communicating, stop sharing? Problems and conflicts need to be openly discussed professionally and resolved. When we hear the word conflict, we immediately think, oh my gosh, I hate conflict. I avoid it at all costs. And yet when I look back in my personal life, in my professional life, in my volunteer life, some of the best things that have happened have arisen from what started as a conflict. So conflicts really are opportunities. And we have to allow people to be able to take risks. You know, I'm sure probably somewhere in your career you've been asked in a professional development class, what could you accomplish if you weren't afraid to fail? And our clubs are the same way. You know, sometimes people won't step out of that box and their comfort zone because, you know, they're afraid to challenge the status quo, or maybe they've been led to believe that they shouldn't dare challenge the status quo. So successful leaders are reliable, they're open, they're accepting and respectful. They walk the walk. You know, I can talk all day long, but if you don't see me modeling those behaviors, I'm not going to be much of a leader. So now let's talk about the careers of our volunteers. And I think of it that way. You know, we have volunteers that will, you know, show up for an event and, you know, that's it, that's all they want to do, and that's okay. But we have a lot of other people, you know, going back to, you know, ask them about the talents that aren't being used. We have a lot of other people that they're in for the long haul, given the right opportunity. If you have never had a discussion with a volunteer about their career, the likelihood of them continuing to stay engaged are significantly diminished. Because when people feel that you care about what they want, they are going to believe the organization cares. You know, this is all about relationships. And I don't know about you all. I haven't been to a live Rotary meeting. My last time being live with Rotarians was at the Homestead on Friday the 13th, 2020. And I miss my club. I miss the relationships. You know, we do Zoom, and so, you know, we look like the Brady Bunch on the screen, you know, all 20 or 30 of us. But it's not the same. You know, and so especially right now, this personal touch is so critical. Now, you have all heard this quote. I'm sure many of you have probably read Jim Collins' Good to Great. People aren't your most important asset. The right people. You know, people can be the best asset. People can be one of the biggest challenges. And we're going to talk about that now, about the wrong people. So let's talk about recruiting volunteers. I want to talk for just a minute, and again, if you want to unmute or post in the chat, how have you recruited during the last year? If you've recruited, how have you recruited for your clubs in the last year? Okay, I'm going to assume the silence means you haven't recruited. Well, I was hoping you all were going to give me some really good answers so that we could look at what I have here on the screen and see that these are not good answers. You know, we don't want to avoid desperation recruiting. And that's the kind of when can you start? You know, let's ask the new guy or new gal. My personal favorite is the fourth one down. Oh, we're so sorry you weren't at the meeting. Let me tell you about the role we assigned you while you weren't there. And finally, think about the times when we get the wrong person on the bus or in a seat on the bus. When we don't get the right volunteer with the right fit, and we'll talk about that in just a minute, it affects everybody. We've actually lost members of our club, of my club. We've lost very valuable members because of people that came into the club that maybe shouldn't have. And they immediately started wreaking havoc. And it's hard to fire volunteers. I know, I've done it. So make sure we don't do the desperation recruiting, that we are intentional about who is being put in a role. So think about your organizations and your volunteers. And again, these are more conversations to have with your volunteers within your committees. So, what have they done in the past that was the most challenging, or the most enjoyable, or the least challenging or enjoyable? Successful managers do a really good job of getting people who fit well into the organization, but then getting them into the right role in the organization. My background is HR, is human resources. Kathy mentioned that. And, there have been multiple times where we've been this close to terminating someone because of their performance. And, the voice of reason prevailed, and we had the, yeah, but what about? And maybe they could have been a different job. And now they're a rock star. So it wasn't the wrong person, it was the wrong seat on the bus. Managers, leaders who focus on the talent look for ways to make the volunteer opportunity, or the opportunity in our club, meaningful. Meaningful to that individual. They look for ways to link team members with other team members. We'll talk about mentors in just a few minutes, but to pair them with someone that's kind of their buddy until they're fully integrated into our clubs. I just taught a class this week for managers here in my own organization on recruiting and interviewing. And we talked about kind of the 3 key things in recruiting. And this wasn't a corporate setting, but I think the same thing applies to our clubs. The first is the can do. So when you're recruiting, you're looking for the technical skills, maybe the professional expertise, education or training. That's the can do. Then you look for the fit factors. What is their attitude? What are their interpersonal skills? How have I seen them interact with others? And then finally, it's the will do. The third factor is the will do. The will do is, back up in the can do, it's the technical. Yeah, they've got the skills to do the job, but the will do is, are they motivated to do it? Are they motivated to contribute in a meaningful way? What is their stress tolerance? How do they handle change? Are they flexible and nimble? Those are, and what I said to my team is, if I have to choose between the perfect applicant from a can-do standpoint, the technical and the experience and the education, and the fit and the will do, I'm going to take fit and will do all day long. Because I am never going to change your personality. I'm not going to change your attitude. Has anybody ever said to you, wow, you have a really lousy attitude, and that immediately improved it? Neither. So what can you change? What can you fix? And you can't fix attitude. So once we've got our volunteers recruited, and we kind of, based on your crickets a few minutes ago, it doesn't sound like we've been doing a lot of recruiting in the last year. So let's talk about all of these volunteers and club members and committee members that we have that are volunteering that have been around for a while. Maybe it's time to re-recruit them to make sure that we are delivering on what we promised, or what we aren't delivering. That they are getting the support or the direction they want or need, or that they aren't getting. Again, going back to that, introvert and extrovert. You've got other personality types that, they like lots and lots and lots of detail. I am not happy until I am buried in the weeds. But you've got other people that really don't need to be told how. Just tell me the what and then leave me alone. My standard joke on that is, do I want to know what time it is, or do I want to know how the clock was made? And my guess is, in your committees, in your clubs, you've got both. And so it's figuring out how to strike the balance so that The people that want the in the weeds detail get enough, and they're also going to be the ones that will corner you after the meeting to ask you 20 more questions. But you haven't totally alienated the people that really only wanted the 60,000 foot view. So this communication piece is really important. And then the developing relationships. And again, in our clubs over the last year, I know for my club it's hard. I'm guessing for your club it's hard. It's hard. I don't build relationships through a computer. That's not my choice. That's not my preference. I'm doing it. I have to. So how are we building those relationships, especially with maybe folks that were newer to our clubs and weren't firmly, entrenched in our clubs before we stopped meeting? And do they know where to go? In the business world, when we hire new employees, there are a couple of big humps that we need to get over. If we can get through the first 90 days, the likelihood is they're going to stick around a while. If we hit a year, we're doing okay. But statistics seem to support that if we can hit a 2-year period with employees, we are likely to have them for the long haul. So think about your clubs and, where are you in that kind of life cycle with your club members, that you may have some that might be at risk for maybe looking elsewhere because they haven't been able to build those relationships. And so what happens when volunteers quit? There are a couple of reasons. Again, I'm sure you've all seen this quote at the bottom of the slide. People don't leave companies or organizations, they leave people. People don't leave Rotary because they have a fundamental opposition with our mission or our vision. They leave because they're not getting what they need. They don't feel connected to a leader. They don't feel that they're being appreciated, or they don't feel that they're being given meaningful opportunities. And as leaders in our clubs, it's up to us to see when these things are happening. Leadership isn't a one-size-fits-all. We can't treat everybody the same. We need to be fair and consistent, but being fair and consistent is different than treating everybody equally. Two totally different things. A leader will figure out what works with different members of their club through trial and error, through flexibility, through evaluating their team, maybe looking at themselves and going, what have I learned as a leader or manager? How would I feel if I were being put in this situation right now? I mentioned mentors a few minutes ago, and volunteers with mentors are twice as likely to stay. They have that connection. In the workplace, the mentor is, the person they go to with all the dumb questions they don't want to ask their managers. And all of the unwritten rules, what time are breaks? Where do we eat for lunch? So what are the unwritten rules in your club? How do people learn those things? A mentor is a great way to do that. And mentors can be formal or informal. It doesn't have to be, something that's on paper, but maybe you quietly whisper into the ear of somebody that will have something in common with a new club member and say, hey, could you maneuver yourself to their table today? Just connect with them. In our clubs, mentoring has two great benefits. The first is transfer of skills and knowledge. It is always good for somebody else to know what's going on. For key roles, for committee chairs, it's always great to have somebody kind of up and coming behind them, even if it is a lifetime appointment for them. And mentoring also helps cement some loyalty with new volunteers because it helps them connect. And it also helps you maybe identify upcoming leaders. It's important to be real with this, with your volunteers, with your mentors. Be real with what you're good at. and be just as real with what you really stink at. You know, I always look for somebody that complements my weaknesses. So, so that, you know, two halves make a whole or a better whole. So what would a mentor talk about? Think about your clubs again. Picture the people sitting around your tables in your club meetings. Who could you pair and have conversations about what I've learned that counts? What's important about the culture of our clubs? My club is 30 some miles away from where I work. So I make up at a lot of different clubs. And you know what? When you've seen one Rotary Club, you've seen one Rotary Club because they're all so different. They have different traditions. And so, you know, how do we incorporate people into our cultures to make it feel like their culture? As a mentor, I talked about, you know, admitting things that you're not good at, but to share, you know, let me tell you about a time when I had a crash and burn. I had this great idea, it didn't work out the way I thought. People appreciate that level of honesty, and you know, while nobody is ever going to learn from our mistakes, they're going to make them their own themselves, just like our kids. They understand that we're all real. And I love this last question. What do I know now that I wish I had known then? What do I know now as a 20-year Rotarian that I wish I had known when I walked in the door? And is that information that might be helpful for a new Rotarian walking in the door? This last little thing here is straight out of a business class, but it's also, if you like this idea of mentoring, whether it's formal or informal, and you know, you've got folks in your club that you would like to ask, and you know the first question they're going to say, well, what do I talk about? So this little take 10 check-in is something we use in the business world as a way to just do a touch with our staff. And so in my club, let's say that I've decided I'm going to take a fairly new member under my wing. Informally, I've connected with them. So I sit down with them at lunch and I say, so, how you doing? How are you feeling about the club? What can I do to help you? And assuming that was a two-way conversation, I just did the 10-10 check-in. How are you doing? How do you think the club's doing? What can I do to help you? And you know, you're not going to sit down and say, so we are now going to have to take 10 check-in. This is a conversation. And you're going to find out some really important things. And you know what? You may not get past the first question. Because sometimes when you say, how are you doing? They may really tell you. And at that point, the other questions don't matter. This is probably one of my favorite slides in this presentation. And as Rick and Kathy said, the presentation will be available. And I will tell you, I have this on, if I'm sitting at my desk looking that way, there's a bulletin board on the wall. I have this on my bulletin board. Think about the last time someone said one of these to you. You know, my favorite is you made my day. That is just an honest, genuine emotion for me. And it's not just you made my day. It's Kathy Napier, you made my day because you fixed my presentation for me because I didn't know how to do it. You made my day. Thank you. And I mean that from the bottom of my heart. So maybe that's not the one that rolls off your tongue. But you know what? Let me tell you one of the things I enjoy most about working with you. Let me tell you how proud you should be of yourself because it's a practice. You know, you might have others that you like, but I love these. And these are the way that we make a difference. I work in the people industry. I work in a retirement community. So not only do I support 320 employees, my job is to make sure that 380 senior citizens are well cared for. My product is people. And if our employees aren't valued and appreciated, that will affect the quality of the care and service they get. If our club members aren't valued and respected and taken care of, that will affect our whole club. So these, I think, are 10 sentences you need to know. Another quote, I love quotes. I've got books of quotes. People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. It's attributed to Theodore Roosevelt. And, you know, I can't say any more about that. It is what it is. It's true. So let's talk about opportunities. And some of you have probably seen this. You know, that big glob in the middle of the screen is a sentence. And we can't talk to each other, but what do you see? Do you see opportunity is nowhere, or opportunity is now here? And the interesting thing is that if your club was here right now, half of them would see opportunities nowhere, and half of them would see opportunities now here. And how you see this may impact how you see the world around you. So it's finding ways to share opportunities, share them in a way that people can receive the information. And the message is that you need to send to your talented people or the talented people in your communities is that the opportunity is now here and that we want them to be a part of that. So the bottom line on opportunity is that more than any other factor, people stay in organizations because of opportunities to be challenged, to do meaningful work. You know, I have never met a bigger bunch of do-gooders than Rotarians, and I love it because I'm kind of a do-gooder at heart too. I want to change the world. I want to make a difference. Or as our theme for this year, change lives and to learn. So that's kind of the opportunity on bottom line. So we were talking just the slide before this about sharing information about opportunities. So I want to talk for just a minute about information. So do you have the scoop or are you out of the loop? Is your club inclusive or are they exclusive? More so in my business life than my volunteer life, you know, you run across those people that believe that, you know, knowledge is power. And the more I know that I don't share with you, that puts me in a position of strength and authority. I look at it completely different. The more the people around me know, the more likely it is that they will be able to function effectively on their own and not need me. The second bullet point, if you don't know this, you need to know this. In the absence of information from you, they will make it up. Silence backfires, and protecting them, trying to protect them doesn't save them. So even bad news is better than no information at all. And it's important to choose the right form of communication. And certainly we've been really limited with the face-to-face thing for a while, but think about your audience. Think about the message that you are communicating. In the business world, the cardinal rule is you don't ever communicate bad news by email. If it's bad news, you need to find a way to do it face-to-face or at least voice-to-voice. That's just not the right way. You don't fire somebody, you know, with an email. And the other thing is that the information has to be good information. I have a friend who's a professional trainer, and one of her favorite lines is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth should not be three different things. So think about that in how your club communicates, how people communicate with each other, and how that information is shared. Sometimes it's 2021 and we're in the age of technology. But you know what? When I want to make sure that people get the news, we still send memos to their homes. Because for some of them, I can count on the spouse opening it and will at least read the information. So sometimes a piece of paper still may be the right way to communicate. When we communicate, we communicate for a reason. Communication always has a purpose. These are the primary reasons we communicate: telling people what to do, giving them information, sharing information with someone who needs it, maybe persuading someone, those of us that are recruiters, trying to recruit volunteers, or to explain something. But being a good communicator is tough. Might be a good speaker, but a horrible listener. Might be a good listener, but I'm not so good at giving feedback because I don't want to speak up and hurt someone's feelings. So think about how you communicate. Open communication is so important. And this seems pretty basic. So why is it that we don't do this all the time or do it in an effective way? Keeping team members informed about the important stuff. Open door and open mind. And I should add to that, sometimes it's open door, open mind, and closed mouth. Because if we're talking, it's a one-way communication. Treat problems as opportunities. We talked a little bit about that. And you know what? When you're wrong, you're wrong. Admit you're wrong. If somebody has a good idea, admit it. I love to tell my team, wow, I would never have thought of that. That's a great idea. Let's do it. So let's talk about another piece of communication. And it's the one that is by far the hardest to control. First of all, you have to remember that silence is a form of feedback. It is a form of communication. I taught for professional development classes for a local college for many years. I actually taught a 4-hour class on what you say when you don't say a word. When you don't react to positive behaviors in some way, people may think you don't care or you didn't notice. And what's happening here is going to have everything to do with how your message is received. Fortunately, you all can only see me from about here up, but those of you that I know personally, if I had to sit on my hands, I wouldn't be able to open my mouth. And that can be distracting. So maybe this is a good way for me to communicate. The nonverbal behaviors can be everything from facial expression to posture, gesture. And we all know how something is said is so much more important than what is said, because the words convey the content, the nonverbal behavior conveys the intent. And I will tell you, most of us are frighteningly transparent with our nonverbal behavior. And I'm just looking at the clock and I'm talking too much, so I'm going to skip this next slide. But what I was going to do here, if you all would have unmuted, was ask you to say this phrase differently. So sarcastically, what would you like me to do about that? Or inquisitively, what would you like me to do about that? Or, the not today and not ever, what would you like me to do about that? And the inflection and the tone changes those words, even though it's the exact same words. Did you know that when you communicate, only 7% of your message is interpreted by the words you actually speak? 38% is the tone of voice, the inflection, the volume, the rate at which you speak. And the other 55% is interpreted by the nonverbal behavior. So this may be, body language. Is someone leaning towards you, or are they sitting away from you? Have you said something and they immediately pull back and cross their arms? Think about if you were on a committee together and you come flying into the room and you come up to me and you say, oh, Cindy, I really need your help. And my response to you is, oh, sure. How can I help you? I'd be happy to help you with that. So the word said, I'd be happy to help you with that. That was the 7%. But I'm guessing that you're leaning more into that 93% that said, not only no, but tomorrow's not looking good either. When there's a mixed message, 7% gets lost in the facial expression, the tone of voice. And I have a challenge for you. And that is, if you've had a conversation recently that didn't go the way you wanted it to go, I want you to go home tonight, or when you get home tonight, go in the bathroom, close the door, run the water so your family can't hear. And I want you to replay that conversation, recreate that conversation, and watch yourself in the mirror. And see whether how you looked, the body language, whether that may be detracted from the message you were trying to convey. Just as I said on an earlier slide, the words convey the content. All of the other things convey the intent. So this is where we've been. We started talking about how you lead. We went through some ideas for recruiting volunteers and how to keep them recruited and re-recruited, how to mentor and engage them, and then how to continue communicating effectively with them. And another quote. So with that, I am happy to take questions. I talked fast enough that we've got 5 minutes left. So I'm happy to answer questions or talk about your concerns or anything that you want to talk about.
So feel free to unmute yourself and ask Cindy any questions, or you can either enter them in the chat and we'll give them back to Cindy and go from there. Cindy, you've given us a lot to think about.
Hopefully there was a nugget or two in there.
There definitely were. And we're so fortunate to have you share all of this knowledge and expertise with us in a very practical way. So thank you.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Does anybody have questions for Cindy? Anybody feel challenged?
Girls?
Definitely challenged, and I don't have any questions, but you did a wonderful job as always.
Thank you. I'm so jealous that you all are together, like in the same room.
This was awesome.
Thank you. Anybody else? Questions?
Everybody's thinking about going home and going and talking to the mirror.
Oh man, I would love for you all to give me feedback if you do that. Because we just don't have any idea many times how we look to other people. You know, we've got that furrow here because we frown a lot. I mean, I don't know, but.
Oh gosh.
All right. Well, if there's nothing else.
Well, there's some thank yous in the chat. So
thank you.
Thank you, Cindy.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure. You all be safe. If you're in the northern part of the region, if you're going to Apple Blossom, keep your mask on, social distance. Don't drink after anybody.
Good advice.
I do what I can. Yeah, said to the girl I share lipstick with.
Great. Well, again, thank you, Cindy. You did a fantastic job. And we'll have the recording and the slides posted on the training page on the district website. So thank you.
If anybody thinks of anything afterwards, look me up. I think I'm the only Cindy Hunter in 7570. So
you are.
I thought I was.
Thank you all for joining us. Have a good evening. Good night.